Welcome to another episode of Witty CFB. Your host, Rob Sheply here. And on today's episode, we're going to be breaking down USC versus Michigan, in particular, how Michigan's offense is going to look with new starting quarterbacks, Alex Orji. Now, Michigan has looked decent the past couple weeks. I mean, they've got a bounce back win versus Arkansas State. They definitely struggled versus Texas a little bit, and now this is a really good opportunity for them to really make a statement win, especially being at home as well. Obviously, they started off the year with walk on Davis Warren, and so far the results have been a bit lackluster. I mean, yes, he's thrown some touchdown passes here and there, but ultimately, what's costing them is a few things. I think number one, the interceptions have just been too many of them, and also it's just bringing a lot of pressure on that offensive line. So much so that a lot of defenses are pretty much just stacking the line, knowing that there's a lot of predictability with the play calling, because ultimately, Kirk Campbell knows that Davis Warren doesn't have the athletic ability to, you know, to do any speed options or read options or kick anything outside. They pretty much know either, Davis Warren's going to do a couple dump off short passes, or you're going to feed it to Donovan Edwards and hopefully get off a big gain. So, although I do think at the time it was right to start Davis Warren, because I do think he outplayed him throughout spring training and all of that too, I think these past couple games have been a testament to ultimately him just not fully taking on the starting role. And it really was necessary for them to make this transition, especially when, you had a softy game last week versus Arkansas State, and, they only put up 28 points against them too. And it really took until about the second half for them to really get the offense going too. It definitely would have been much better you know, if Warren was able to kind of limit the turnovers. And, it's not even so much necessarily that they didn't put up that many points. It's how they got to that 28 points that I think is the bigger issue going into this. So with that said, I mean, Alex Orji, he's a junior. He's 6'3", 235, very physically imposing. He's athletic. He's got speed on the outside. So I think what more or less this is really going to be saying a couple things. I think for starters, I think Sharon Moore and Michigan's offense and Kirk Campbell, to me, the message to all of the Big Ten and all of their opponents moving forward is, hey, we're going to be doing a 65-35 or a 70-30 rush pass offense. And, I even said this in my preview with them playing Texas, is to me, that is the identity of the team. That's the strength of the team. And quite frankly, they should be double downing on that. But I think they have to be doing it in a smart and efficient way where it does, like I said before, it does give the offensive line a little bit less pressure, and it's not forcing them to, hold blocks for nearly as long too, because that really is the strength of the team. Even we saw this last year a little bit with JJ McCarthy. There were a lot of times, particularly with pass blocking, for example, there were a lot of times where, defensive linemen were able to just steamroll right through them. But luckily, JJ McCarthy was elusive enough to be able to scramble outside the pocket and get a couple extra seconds and find the open receiver. The issue with this year is you don't have that luxury where if one of the tackles or a guard makes a mistake and lets somebody through, that Warren and Ojai are just going to be able to scramble around and ultimately find the right guy. Because the issue you have with Davis Warren is your offense is severely limited to mainly just short passes. Whereas with Alex Ojai, yes, you do have the running component of it. You do have some more versatility to some extent too. But I think where you're really getting the advantage of him is, you're going to have better arm strength with him. So if he can show in any sort of capacity that his accuracy has been improved upon since what we saw last year, because what we see now is he's only made a handful of passing attempts. He's had 2 touchdown passes, which is great, but those are in very certain situations. So, and two, I think when you watch Davis Warren on film, I think there were definitely some footwork issues, some mechanical issues that I think certain defenses were able to take advantage of if they were able to jump a route early or any of that too. And when you have only a 35% passer rating too, it definitely calls into question that offense too, because you know at the end of the day, Michigan is one of those programs where they are expected to win. I mean, you do remember the days of Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke, even back then too. They were always within the top 25 too. So ultimately, this Michigan game and this offense is really going to be, figuring out whether or not are they a legitimate top 25 team. Because I would argue so far this year they have not played like a top 25 team. When you have an offense who's been for the most part pretty predictable, when you have I do think they absolutely had to make this change. I really don't think they had a choice. But what makes this situation a little bit different than what you've made see at Florida is Davis Warren was on a shorter leash, where you can argue that Warren and Ojai were on pretty similar boats. Just a matter of, okay, would you rather have a guy who can make all the basic throws on the field and hopefully doesn't turn the ball over too much, which obviously didn't happen, or do you go with Ojai, who he has the better arm strength? I think his mechanics are a little bit more consistent. It opens up the playbook. It allows it to be a little more versatile too. But at the same time, too, Michigan is definitely going to be double downing on this rushing attack, and going to now transitioning to USC. Their defense has played pretty rock solid these past couple weeks to start out. I mean, obviously versus LSU, that was a big, statement win for them. Obviously LSU hasn't won a season opener under Brian Kelly, but at the same time, that's been the Achilles heel for USC for so many years now. So for them to come out with, making the necessary stops on third down, for them to be able to get pressure on Garrett Nussmeier in that beginning of the game, and for the most part, they've been pretty consistent. Even when they had the blowout win versus Utah State, you really didn't see anything that stood out on film to the point where you would really get nervous about seeing this team playing in a big spot, and especially their first real true test in the Big Ten, traveling to the Big House. I do think this is going to be a really good opportunity for USC to possibly put out another statement win and say, hey, we're back on the map. We're going to be a more balanced team now, and we have what it takes to make a legitimate run. Whereas the past couple years in the Pac-12, you were either you were either getting stopped by Utah in the championship game, or your defense was simply not able to make enough stops or put up too many or giving up too many explosive plays to the point where any sort of chance that you had at a national championship or a conference title was pretty much gone. Now you know let's also give Miller Moss some credit too. I mean, all things considered, he's he's looked confident, he's looked poised, he's finding the open receivers, he's allowing his playmakers to make plays. I mean, he's putting passes in situations where you're getting a lot more yards after catch. And the offensive line, for the most part, has done a really good job of protecting him, too. Granted, a part of the college game is always going to be you're going to have to learn how to scramble a little bit. You're going to have to learn how to make sure that your eyes are looking down the field for possibly different targets, too. And when you think about it that way, this matchup, it does seem really favorable to USC. Now, the real key question is, can USC's defensive line led by Bear Alexander, can that defensive line bully their offensive line enough to the point where it's going to force Ojai to make some of those critical throws on third down? Are they going to be able to pressure and make him feel uncomfortable even while at home? Now, granted, I do think that for the most part too, you know, Moss has definitely looked strong and the weapons are there and everything like that. But I do think to some degree Moss and Ojai are kind of in the same sort of boat where they are taking over for very talented quarterbacks. With Moss, obviously, you're taking over for Caleb Williams, and then Ojai is now taking over for JJ McCarthy. So there is an inherent pressure to be able to start off immediately. But I do think what this game is really going to symbolize is the new is to some extent the new identity of USC, where yes, we are going to still find a lot of those explosive plays with USC, but I do think a lot of what we're going to see moving forward is relying on that strong front seven and a really aggressive secondary to the point where they are going to attack you on certain passes. They are going to trust some of their secondary on those one-on-one reads. And, when it comes down to it, I mean, Michigan is going to need some explosive plays if they have any chance to beat USC today. We're really going to have to see Alex Orji scramble for maybe a 15, 20-yard gain, or even have a Donovan, or, if you realize that Ojai can't get those explosive plays, have a Donovan Edwards being able to average, even 3 or 4 yards rushing per down, to the point where on those critical second or third downs, it is going to be a third and manageable, not a 3rd and 8 or a 3rd and 7. So to me, when I look at this matchup, it really comes down to what extent can Alex Ojai's running ability make this play calling a lot more versatile than what we saw with Davis Warren. I think to what extent are their identities still founded, and to what extent will it kind of be changed over the period of the game. And I think most importantly, what's going to happen is to what it is who's really going to be controlling the tempo, and who's really going to be controlling the tempo of the game. If Michigan can get in a groove and being able to run the ball and do what they typically do, it really gives Miller Moss a lot less opportunities to march down the field and put up points on the board. However, if USC can ultimately stuff Ojai, and what we've seen is Michigan doesn't feel comfortable with Ojai throwing the ball, and they double down on that, and USC is able to stop them, I think it could be a really long day for Michigan. So I would say look for those matchups in particular, and it really ultimately could be a good day for USC football and another statement win versus Michigan.